I am Eleni from Learning Loft Education, where we specialise in VCE English tutoring and tutoring for English from Year 7 to 10. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Sunset Boulevard, an incredibly popular choice for schools in Year 12 for mainstream English. Now, we're going to be talking about 3 references that are made in the film that maybe you don't know what they are. Maybe they slip past you. Maybe you notice them and you don't know many details about it, so you don't know how to use these references. But these references are super important and can help elevate your writing and analysis. So let's get into it. So our first reference that is made is Miss Havisham. Miss Havisham is mentioned when Joe, after escaping the little debt collector guys and parks his car, he goes up the little walkway through Norma's house, essentially the outside of her house, and he starts noting how the mansion looks. He starts making comments about how neglected it is. All right, so he's looking and he references Miss Havisham from the text Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Let's see what Joe says.
It was a great big white elephant of a place. The kind crazy movie people built in the crazy 20s. A neglected house gets an unhappy look. This one had it in spades. It was like that old woman in Great Expectations, that Miss Havisham in her rotting wedding dress and her torn veil, taking it out on the world because she'd been given the go-by.
So now we see, and we get some little bit of info about who Miss Havisham is, but let's go into more detail about her. So in the novel Great Expectations, Miss Havisham is a character who is abandoned by her husband on her wedding day, or her fiance, I should say rather. She is mid getting ready for her own wedding. She has her wedding dress on. Everything is dolled up for the wedding. There is a cake on the table. She has one shoe on when she receives a letter from her fiance saying, "Nah, not happening." So what she does in response is she starts falling into this almost pit of despair and she memorializes the day. Everything in the house is kept exactly the same. She is kept exactly the same. She's wearing one wedding shoe, the other foot does not have a shoe on, right? She's still in her wedding dress. She sits at her table with her rotting cake. Everything is going, right? Because she's memorialized a day that's happened many, many years in the past. So the time that Joe is referencing is when she's much older. At that point, she had raised and adopted a girl named Estella and raised her to be beautiful, desirable, but completely heartless in a sort of plot of revenge of what happened to her. She shuts out the outside world completely for 2 decades. Now, Lit Charts has this very lovely description of her. So let's hear what they have to say. They describe Miss Havisham as capricious, manipulative, bitter, and until novel's end, unable to recognise anyone's pain but her own. Does that not sound like someone we know? Oh, I forgot to even mention, this was an interesting part. The clocks in her house were stopped at the time of when she received the letter. So time has literally stood still in this house and for Miss Havisham. So let's talk about the analysis. What does this have to do with Norma and Sunset Boulevard? So hopefully you've seen the film, or else this won't make as much sense. But Norma, like Miss Havisham, has completely memorialized her past. She is stuck in the past of time when she was popular in Hollywood, desired, youthful. So she has kept her home very much like almost a tomb or a monument to her old life, with photos of herself from her youth everywhere throughout the home. She is obsessed with returning back and reverting back to that youthfulness, just like Miss Havisham has stopped time, metaphorically and kind of literally, in her house of the day she was rejected, right? The other thing you can consider with this parallel between these 2 characters is that weddings at the time, and perhaps still to today, for women were often associated with this youthfulness, right? Women were getting married quite young. Miss Havisham and Norma technically have failed at this duty of women to get married and successfully wed, basically. So Miss Havisham is rejected by her fiance and doesn't get married. Norma has multiple failed marriages and she keeps her ex-husband as a butler. So both of these women sort of represent the failures of women when they don't fulfill their womanly duties of the time, which is to be married. And both characters are punished by a slow descent into absolute insanity. Okay, everyone has continued to reject them after their initial rejection. The other thing you can consider as well is the fact that Norma dedicates her time to such an extent to her career and to Hollywood that it's almost like, bear with me, she is married to her job. So Miss Havisham is rejected by her fiancé. Norma is rejected by the very industry that praised her youthfulness at one point, and when she no longer was desirable or youthful, able to keep up with the times, was rejected by it too. So these reactions are both to these pseudo-husbands, I guess you could say, because neither ended up turning out to be a husband in one's industry, not a real person. So when you're talking about this obsession with youthfulness, when you're talking about being obsessed with the past, you could bring up this reference to Miss Havisham of the way in which people respond in the Hollywood industry, or about women in particular, if you want to make it gender focused, and how the society around them punishes them and how they punish themselves and how they react to these scenarios. Our second reference is Salome. Okay, Salome is the name of the character that Norma is writing a script about, a movie script about, and that's what she asks Joe to help her edit and refine so that she could make it into a big picture. Let's watch Norma talk about her script.
It's the story of Salome. I think I'll have DeMille direct it.
DeMille? Uh-huh.
We made a lot of pictures together.
And you'll play Salome.
Who else?
Fair enough.
Salome. What a woman. What a part. The princess in love with a holy man. She dances the dance of the 7 veils. He rejects her, so she demands his head on a golden tray, kissing his cold, dead lips.
They'll love it in Pomona.
They love it every place. Read it.
As we can see, Norma is inspired by this character, this person, and she thinks she can play Salome. Joe has an interesting reaction that tells us perhaps maybe this isn't the most realistic response by her. Now let's get into who Salome was so it makes a little bit more sense as to why this is an odd and interesting choice. So Salome is a character that's first mentioned in the Bible, right? After that time, there's been many depictions about her that have sort of altered our perspectives, but we're going to talk about a mix of both. So we've got the biblical depictions. There are multiple depictions of her. And as well, we've got Oscar Wilde's play named after her, Salome. Okay, it's sort of mixed in together in the more modern depictions and understanding of who Salome was. But in the Bible, Salome is the daughter of Herodias, her mum, and her stepfather / uncle, Herod Antipas, right, who was the ruler of Galilee, a region in Palestine. So the rest of this information is going to be a little bit mixed up. I'm going to do my best to separate the two, but it's going to be mixed up between the two sources. Right? So let's talk about who John the Baptist is. So Norma makes a comment about the holy man that Princess Salome was in love with. The holy man is John the Baptist, who was a Jewish prophet, and he disagreed. He condemned publicly Herod and Herodias' marriage because under Jewish law at the time, it was unlawful to marry your brother's wife if your brother was still alive, and the brother was still alive. So this makes her mum marries her brother-in-law while her husband, ex-husband, is still alive. Okay, so he publicly condemned this. Herod and Herodias knew about this. Herod was aware and acknowledged the popularity that John the Baptist had at the time and was very hesitant to do anything too drastic, such as kill him, in response. Regardless, Herodias, Salome's mum, was not happy about this. So in biblical depictions, she was really upset about this, and she sort of came up with her own plot about how to respond. But in Oscar Wilde's play, Salome was in love with John the Baptist. Okay, she desired him, but John the Baptist didn't want her and rejected her because, and he calls her daughter of Babylon, daughter of Sodom. These two locations are sort of symbolic representations of places in the Bible, of places of moral decay and absolute wickedness. So in response to what her parents, her mum and her stepdad have done, she is punished for that representation, and therefore John the Baptist doesn't want anything to do with her. So she feels rejected, and then in Oscar Wilde's play, she comes up with this plot. Okay? So on an evening at a festival, Herod, her stepdad, has all these guests that he's entertaining. Now, Salome dances for them, and in response to her mystifying dancing. Herod says he's going to grant her anything that she wants, up to half his kingdom. And she turns around and asks for John the Baptist's head on a platter. Depends on the depiction you're looking at whether the platter exists or not, but Norma mentions it. So, on a platter. Now, in biblical depictions, that is the mother's plot, because she's upset that John the Baptist condemned her marriage. In Oscar Wilde's play, however, it is in response to being rejected by John the Baptist. So Herod, because he made this promise in front of all these guests and all these people, had to fulfill it and ends up having John the Baptist killed and decapitated. In Oscar Wilde's play, though, Salome announces and attempts to kiss the lips of the decapitated head of John the Baptist. And that is what Norma is saying, kisses his cold, dead lips. I think that's exact wording. In response to that action, Herod is disgusted and has her killed, and so she is crushed by his soldiers. Now, so throughout history and throughout time, in these many depictions, Salome went from an innocent pawn almost in her mother's game to this lethal seductress. Or in other words, a term that we might be familiar with because of Sunset Boulevard, a femme fatale. So let's talk about this connection with Norma. So, as I said, Salome, femme fatale, she is youthful, she's desirable, she is beautiful, right? And Norma, in Sunset Boulevard, is inspired by her and wants to play her. Hence, Joe's reaction of like, okay, making more sense, because Norma is no longer these things according to Hollywood at the time. So Norma's desire to play Salome makes sense to show her detachment from the reality of Hollywood. She still thinks she is the youthful version of herself, the desirable version of herself that existed back in the silent movie era, that long ago kept her supported but has now rejected her. So Salome is also a character that gets punished by the men around her in some extent. She is lethal, as she has John the Baptist killed. Norma also has Joe killed by actually killing him, and in response is metaphorically crushed, like Salome was, by the media and the Hollywood attention that happens, that overrides her initial beauty and desirability that she had in the first place, that granted her the ability to do almost anything. So those are some of the parallels that you can draw in your writing when talking about Norma and talking about her being stuck in the past and her detachment from the reality of Hollywood. Finally, our last reference is Queen Kelly. Now, Queen Kelly is not actually a term that's mentioned in this film, but Queen Kelly is a film that is shown in Sunset Boulevard, or at least snippets of it. So when Joe is going and explaining about how, the time that they're spending together and what Norma wants to do, he mentions the fact that Norma likes to watch her old movies. So they're sitting and there's a projector. I'm going to play this clip for you. So on the wall, you will see Queen Kelly being depicted.
She'd sit very close to me, and she'd smell of tube roses, which is not my favorite perfume, not by a long shot. Sometimes as we watched, she'd clutch my arm or my hand, forgetting she was my employer, just becoming a fan, excited about that actress up there on the screen. I guess I don't have to tell you who the star was. They were always her pictures. That's all she wanted to see.
So the interesting thing about this is that it's referenced as one of Norma's old movies. However, in real life, it is actually one of Gloria Swanson's old movies. Gloria Swanson is the actress who plays Norma. And the director of that silent film, the director of Queen Kelly, is Erich von Stroheim. Erich von Stroheim plays Max, the butler, ex-husband, ex-director. So if you didn't already know that there are a lot of characters that are almost playing a version of themselves, now you do. So both Gloria Swanson and Erich von Stroheim are playing Norma and Max together. Max in Sunset Boulevard is an ex-silent film director who made Norma a star. Norma is a silent film actress that is no longer a star. All right, so let's talk about Queen Kelly for a moment. Queen Kelly was set to be like a 5-hour silent film. And according to some sources, and after doing some conversions, spent almost 22 million Australian dollars AUD, right? And it wasn't even done. And it got cut short in 1929 for a variety of reasons. Like, people keep saying different things, whether it was Gloria Swanson or whether it was a producer, but nevertheless, it got cut short. Okay, so it got cut short and it never was played in the US. There is mentions that there was played in Europe briefly. But until Sunset Boulevard, it was not put on the screens in the US. Because this film was cut short, there was a lot of sort of controversy about it and a lot of talk about it. And in a New York Times article that I found by someone named Steve Harvey, written in 1985, talking about this 1929 film being depicted in Sunset Boulevard in 1950. I know there was a lot of dates. Harvey says this very interesting quote. He says that its collapse, the film's collapse, marked the beginning of the end of its star's reign. Gloria Swanson, who plays Norma, as queen of the box office, and effectively finished von Streiham's, playing Max, butler, ex-director, ex-husband, his always turbulent career as one of the screen's most eccentric and gifted directors. This is significant because this is a movie about the downfall of a silent film actress who cannot adapt to the times. And they're depicting a film that marked the collapse of a box office star's reign and this silent film director who was known to be a bit strange, marking the end of his career too. Now, did their career fully end? Not really. No, it didn't fully end. But it wasn't praised in any way. It was starting to begin their downward trajectory. These two characters that they play are in the exact same position. So this meta reference parallels both the characters and the actors/directors' real life situations. Right, so imagine in a 1950s audience, you would be aware and you would be seeing Max von Streicham and be aware, at least to some extent, that he had a big career. His name is depicted in the credits. People would have recognized it in some way or form. Now, watching this film is a really strange meta situation where Norma is obsessing with her past, but it's also Gloria referencing her past and being stuck in this past. This film, Sunset Boulevard, now I'm talking about, is a commentary about Hollywood that is so entrenched in itself. It is referencing so many actual things in Hollywood that the lines between fiction and reality blur and cross consistently and constantly. This is mimicking the delusion and the grandeur of the facade of Hollywood and the ways in which it absolutely entraps its citizens in its past. They're all reminiscing of their former glory that Hollywood is no longer granting them access to, and that Hollywood itself seems really flash and seems really amazing, but at the end of the day, it will never be sustained and you will be rejected and tossed to the side. That's what the film is saying, and they're using people, real life people, who have gone through that very phenomenon. So those are 3 references that are mentioned in Sunset Boulevard that hopefully after this video make a bit more sense and enable you to include it in your essay writing. Also, Sunset Boulevard is a fantastic film. There is so much to unpack there. I've watched it that many times that I continue to find little things that we can talk about. So keep watching it, keep researching these references because they are significant and they do help you reach into the minds of a 1950s audience who would have watched this at the beginning and who would have been the target audience for this film. Please let me know in the comments what you thought. Does it make sense? Do you like Sunset Boulevard? Is this working for you? Is it making sense of how to include it in your essays? Good luck with it. Also, if you want to check some more free resources and check out Learning Loft Education, feel free to go to our website, learningloft.com.au. I also have a link tree in the bio, which also has some free resources in there too. If you're interested in tutoring and what we do, feel free to have a look on our website in the What We Do section and our tutoring inquiries section. One of us will get back to you very soon. Enjoy your day and good luck analysing Sunset Boulevard.